You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
Welcome. You are listening to Watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Well, financial survival, financial health, thriving in the new economy. One of the most injurious events that can take place in one's financial life, in your financial life, is divorce. When it's handled traditionally and perhaps not in the best interest of the parties being divorced, it can be financially devastating for all parties concerned. But my next guest is working to change all that. Her name is Joryn Jenkins. Joryn, you're an attorney. You've specialized in family law, matrimonial law. You're in my adopted home state of Florida. So retired, semi-retired, in quotes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've got a unique take on this, and you're furthering the concept of collaborative divorce. Tell us, what made you realize that the system really had to change, that it wasn't really serving the parties' interests?
You know, it's funny, Kerry, because I come out of commercial litigation, business litigation, breach of contract. I never did personal injury, but with those types of things where it's really just about the money. It's just really about the money. And so they're business decisions, and quite often there's no intensity, there's no, it's just business. And then I started doing family law, to be honest, because I opened my own practice. And as a female, oh gosh, I hate to think how many years ago, 25 years ago, that was an unusual thing. Well, I've been practicing 43 years now. So I opened my own practice. I was teaching for a while. I opened my own practice, and all my buddies in commercial litigation wanted to do me a favor, but they wanted to keep the commercial stuff for themselves. So they would send me their divorce cases. And so here I am learning this new area of law, and I'm thinking, this is just kind of odd. It doesn't seem to work all that well. Nobody wins. There's no real winning. Quite often I'd leave the courtroom and I had technically won, but my client was poor, where they hadn't been poor before. They'd spent everything they had to win, and they weren't all that thrilled with the results. So eventually, you start to realize, if nobody's winning in the courtroom, isn't there another way to do this?
Right. Well, there are usually two winners in every matrimonial case. And that is the opposing counsels. Although my experience in this, and I spent a lot of years, my family had a business of printing up cases on appeal in the Northeast.
Really?
So thousands of these matrimonials go by, and it was just, a lot of times the attorneys would just be adding gasoline to the fire to keep it going and keep.
I hate to agree with you. Because I don't like casting aspersions at an entire profession. I think it's unprofessional to do that. And in fact, I was very, very involved with the American Inns of Court, which the tenet of the American Inns is to advance professionalism, civility, and credibility in the profession. And I was very, very active in that. But there's no question that in family law, you find the dregs of the profession to a large degree. Now, not me, obviously. I'm a very good lawyer. And there are plenty of very good lawyers. But you do find the dregs. And I find that also in bankruptcy law, to be honest. But when I say dregs, I don't mean just the poor lawyers. I mean the lawyers who really aren't quite as ethical as you would want them to be, who push the boundaries, who actually put themselves ahead of their clients. And the lines are very hard to see. Technically speaking, they really are. For example, If I file a petition and I ask for custody of the children, and by the way, I'm going to use old terminology because those are the real black and white kind of terms. We've moved beyond those by now. But let's say that I was asking for, and I'm dad, and dads don't usually get custody in the old days, but I ask for custody, 100% custody, and I ask for child support, and I ask for alimony. What the heck? Let's ask for that too. Well, the lawyer's actually not doing that because he's a jerk. He's doing that because things change during a divorce, especially if it takes 5 years to get divorced, which they can. And maybe my client loses his leg during the divorce and actually does need alimony at the end of the case. So the lawyers are CYAing, to put it briefly. But so sometimes, are they really CYAing or are they just making more money? It's hard to tell.
Yeah, well, I can recount a story to you that I have personal knowledge of. Was my sister's divorce, took place in Cook County, Illinois.
Oh, Chicago.
The definition of an honest judge in Chicago is one who's fixed and stays fixed. And I can tell you that at this point, the statute of limitations is run. My sister has passed away. Both sides bribed the judge. And he still decided against my sister.
Oh, my Lord. Well,
I know this for a fact. Okay, this is not, he said, she, you heard it fifth hand. I know it. And
Kerry, that's the worst story I've ever heard. I can say that without any question.
Went on for 9 years.
Yeah. I had one that went 5 years. I represented the mom. The baby was 14 months old when they filed. Mom was a stewardess, but had stayed home during her pregnancy. 2 weeks after she delivered, Grandpa shows up in the hospital. Grandpa was a lawyer, by the way, a JAG, so not really technically practicing law. But he shows up in the hospital and he says to her, it would be good if you had a second child, just one to hold in reserve. And I'm not using the right words that he had used. I'm drawing a blank on them right now. But basically what he was saying was, I already have a successor now, my grandson, and I'd like another one just in case something happens to the first one, which, she's 2 days after giving delivery, she's beside herself with, how dare you? A year later, husband files for divorce. She's still not working. She goes back to work to finance her legal fees, my fees. Eventually, she sells her pre-owned condo from Miami. She sells it to fund my fees because that's how much money we're spending. Meanwhile, Grandpa is drafting all of Dad's pleadings. And I know this because they were so poorly written and because the lawyers kept changing. And then right after a lawyer would change, something would get filed that wasn't signed by anybody. No lawyer signed it. Oh, no. So Grandpa was really inserting himself. Eventually, I got Mom her fees from Dad, who, by the way, Dad was just a pawn. Grandpa was running the show. But we went on for 5 years. They appealed rulings that I had technically won 4 times. There was one appeal where they were asking for 50-50 time sharing, which by the time this case happened, which was actually only 15 years ago, was not so unusual. And we were not really fighting it, except that Mom lived 50 miles away, which made it very difficult to do 50-50 time sharing. You can't do it every other night, can't do it every other night. Hard to do it every week because how's the kid going to get to school in between? Dad's going to drive 50 miles each way? Doesn't make sense. So eventually I suggested to the judge in the middle of trial that Mom would work all weekends and she should get weekdays and Dad should get all weekends. That's what the judge ordered, and Dad appealed. And after he lost the appeal, get this, you're shaking your head. Get this, after he lost the appeal, he then gave Mom back 2 weekends a month. So he went to a standard, old-fashioned dad time sharing every other weekend, voluntarily.
And how many thousands of dollars got wasted?
I guesstimated that she had spent, and it wasn't really a guesstimate because I was her lawyer, $250,000 in 5 years. And Dad probably spent, given that he had to appeal 4 times and all I had to do was defend an appeal, so a lot easier, less work.
Sure.
He probably spent around 200, but Grandpa was doing the pleadings. He probably still spent 200,000. He went through 11 lawyers, plus 4 appellate lawyers.
And in the end, he wound up exactly where he would have been had he settled. And, people always think lawyers, they're just there to stir up the pot and, get fees. When I had clients came to me, I would just say, look, just settle this. The best thing a lawyer could do.
Oh, yeah.
Encourage the parties to settle. And that's effectively what you're doing through collaborative law is like work out an agreement, avoid the courtroom.
And sometimes I do it completely from a financial perspective. If you're not suing, used to be 30,000. If you're not suing for 50,000 or more, you're wasting time and money and headache and heartache. Don't litigate over 50,000 or less because you're going to spend 50,000 easy.
Yep. It's so true. But most lawyers won't do that. And the primary function of a lawyer should be, in any given case, to avoid litigation wherever possible.
Abraham Lincoln said it best.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do in collaboration, and that's collaboration with a big C. I know we use that term a lot these days, but we started using it 20 years ago for this particular method of approaching a dispute. The lawyers both sign an agreement that they will not go to court. Now, what does that mean? Can the client still go to court? Sure. The client can pull the plug on the collaboration, and the lawyers are fired, technically. Each of us would then help our client find a new lawyer. We'd prep the new lawyer, but we're out. And what that does, and I know you know this, what it does, it takes the impetus away from the lawyer to stir the pot. So the lawyer is all in on, let's get this settled. What can we do to make it acceptable to both sides to accept this resolution that we've come up with? And in order to do that, we use a financial neutral, someone who is not, someone who's objective. If the parties have financial issues between them, we often use a family counselor to help them talk to each other. I had a gal come out of her divorce, and she had, in the middle of the divorce, she'd run out of the conference room crying. And I'd found her in the parking lot, and I said, "What's wrong? Yeah, come back in. We can do this." And she said, "He doesn't listen to me. He never listens to me." And she just went on and on. I said, No. Come back in the room. We'll help him hear you. We finalized that case a couple of months later, and her comment to me at the end of the case was, I learned to listen to my husband again. I don't think she remembered that she'd complained that he didn't listen to her. She said, I learned to hear him again because when someone else says the same thing that he said, I couldn't hear him. But if you said it to me, I heard it and I understood it better. So I learned to talk to my husband again. And they still got divorced, but I had one where we're walking out of the courtroom and the woman throws her arms around the guy's neck and she says, I hope you know I will always love you. We may be divorced, but I will always love you.
I love war stories. So basically the lawyers pretty much disavow their financial interest in stirring the pot, as it were.
Right.
And agree to, there's still a fee to be had, obviously.
Oh, sure.
Not like the litigation fees and all that.
Well, but if you go to trial, you're going to spend $100,000. If you collaborate, and I'm going to make $100,000. If you collaborate, I'm going to make, on average, 10 or 12 grand. I'd rather do 10 of those cases than one of the other kind.
Yeah, a lot less aggravation. It's so hard, I remember the old story. You get out of law school, the client comes to you and they tell you, "Oh, I've got this case. You wouldn't believe what that SOB did to me, blah, blah, blah." And you're all gung-ho, you're like idealistic attorney. And then, the whole thing gets started. You talk to the other attorney and then he's, "Oh, but, here's like what happened here. Here's his side of the story." And it's like, oh,
Oh, and it's also so much fun when your client is caught lying on the stand. It doesn't happen to me very often, but I did have a client who assured me that that he wasn't on any dating sites. And this was, 20, 15 years ago when that wasn't all that common.
Yeah.
And he gets on the stand and the other side holds up a picture of a website. And not only is he on there, but he's lied on there about his name, his age, and his income.
And his status.
and either lied about his income there or he lied about his income in court. And to me, I don't know which one it was. I'll never know, but it didn't matter because are you lying now or were you lying then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Those are the kind of cases you dream of, being the attorney doing the cross-exam, not having your client make you look like an idiot.
Oh, listen, Kerry, I had a case. What was it? It was not a breach of contract, but a couple had bought a rest stop, a roadside diner. Mm-hmm. And shortly after they bought it, the interstate gave notice that they were closing down the exit off the interstate that led right up to the diner. And my clients were convinced that all the people in the neighborhood had known ahead of time that that was going to happen. And we litigated for 1.5 years trying to find the proof. And I finally got into the offices at the Department of Transportation. So the other attorney and I and my client went to the Department of Transportation, and the guy said, we were supposed to do the deposition, but the guy said, here are all my files, help yourself. We go into the files and there are 4 letters from the prior owner to DOT begging them not to close down the exit and to change their minds about how they're going to handle that. And I held them out in there on the spot to the other attorney. He said, boy, I'm sure glad you found them. I don't know what I would have done if I had been the one to find them, because we were all going through the records. And I'm sure he would have been honest about it, but it would have really caused him pain.
Yeah, well, it's basically, blowing up your case.
Yeah.
No lawyer likes to do that, which is why people need to settle. So, Joryn, what is it about today, and not just matrimonials, but all sorts of disputes, cases, where people just dig in and you refuse to do the rational thing? Why? What are we going through as a society, a world where we can't play nicely with each other?
Well, part of it is in for a dime, in for a dollar. You spend a little bit of money and you feel like you have to keep spending money. Part of it is you don't drive the train. In theory, your attorney's driving the train. But actually, think about this. It's not your attorney driving the train. It's your attorney and the other attorney and the judge, and all 3 of them are struggling over the steering wheel. To a large degree, the judge is driving the train, but really the judge is an objective third-party observer. His calendar is intrinsic, but there's not too much that he does that decides where the train's going to go. The 2 attorneys are struggling with the judge looking on. And sometimes the judge does, like the judge in Florida will often send you to mediation. Well, 20 years ago, there was no such thing as, 20 years, 30 years ago, there was no such thing as mediation. I remember when I got divorced, 2-year marriage, very simple, never combined our finances, nothing like that. And I said to the lawyer, why can't we just agree? I just need to walk away from this. I'm done. And the lawyer said, no, I'll file a petition. We'll get it done. Don't worry. That was my only option. File a petition, go to court. And it wasn't until halfway through that I realized that there was this thing called mediation. And I called the guy up and I said, no, this is what we're doing. We went to mediation. It was done. In 2 weeks, it was done. No big deal.
So there was a judge in the Bronx. He was the assignment judge, and he had a sign on his desk that said, settle or pick, which meant either you're settling the case now or you're going downstairs to pick a jury immediately. And that guy had the highest settlement rate of any judge on the planet. He was a horrible guy. Like, people dreaded it. But But
I've heard of judges doing that, not quite that obviously, but yes. Certainly in small claims court here, quite often you'd show up for your preliminary hearing and you'd get a choice. You either come back later in the week and pick a jury, or you go to mediation right now with this guy right here who's sitting in the jury box waiting for cases to be assigned to him. The jury box was full of mediators, which I thought was very smart.
Well, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems is that these judges, many of them out there, could never hack it practicing law. And through their connections, whatever, political connections, they got to become judges. It's kind of like teachers, those who can't do teach, and those who can't practice become judges. And so many of these cases, if you had a strong judge who really was strict with the parties and didn't let any interminable delays take place, anything else, really held them to their feet to the fire, you could get rid of these cases, but we don't have enough of those judges.
That's right. Many judges are wishy-washy, and they would defend themselves by saying, I'm just giving the parties time to work things out, to realize that they don't have a case, to, they've got all kinds of excuses, but you do find that the stronger judges get their cases run through the system a lot faster.
Yeah, and 98% of all the cases anyway that don't get settled right away get settled on the steps of the courthouse.
After you spend $90,000 instead of $100. Yeah.
So why did we have to go that far? And I always thought one day maybe I'll become a judge. I did this, and I was a small claims court mediator or arbitrator rather, in New York City. And, I just cut to the chase. Don't give me, dry cleaning cases, stupid cases.
It's funny. I just finished an arbitration this morning, and it's a 3-panel arbitration. So I was one of the arbitrators, and I wrote to the chief arbitrator, and I said, look, when you draft this decision, you really need to try and explain to the plaintiff why she didn't have a case. She had no case. It was a food poisoning case. And there was no connection. She was sick that night, and not even a doctor who said, oh yeah, you had food poisoning, much less you had food poisoning and it was caused by your lunch that day. She just did. But, older woman, she didn't have a clue. She was representing herself. So I said, you really need to make sure that, because I don't draft the opinion that the chief judge does. And so that's what he did. As a matter of fact, I just got off the phone with him when you called, just clarifying a few things, because you don't want an arbitrator. This was non-binding arbitration. So she had the option of accepting the ruling or going back to the judge. And you want to help get rid of the backlog of cases, and you want to help keep people from going through the angst of litigation. She talked a lot about how long this had dragged out and how painful it was. And well, yeah, of course, you're reliving the pain of 2 days in the hospital throwing up and not being sure if you would live or die. Every time you get deposed and you deal with it, put it behind you, move on.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. So obviously we have to head for this because very few people out there, big corporations, can afford to litigate till the cows come home, and the cows never come home. But individuals, unless they're extremely well-heeled, cannot afford to do it. Yeah. And even those who don't want to do it because they know it's a waste of money and time.
Family law judges will tell the clients, look, do you want to spend what money you have, your kids' college education, on getting divorced? Why can't you find a middle ground? And in collaboration, we help them find that middle ground. Quite often, a financial person will come up with something that neither of the lawyers thought of, and certainly neither of the clients thought of. And sometimes the facilitators, the communications people who usually have a mental health background, will come up with solutions that nobody thought of. So it's an interesting process. Brainstorming with a team of 4 professionals and your ex, you can come up with some very interesting scenarios. Well, I've created time-sharing agreements that no judge would ever order. on his own. He would never, because it's just not normal. But it works for this family. I had a divorce where the guy was a deputy sheriff. The wife was, the wife was a deputy sheriff. The guy was a firefighter. And turns out they could both go to their bosses. They had enough seniority to choose a schedule that they wanted. They each designed their own schedule. And ultimately, bottom line, they each had 100% time sharing with their daughter. It sounds crazy, right? Yeah. But the daughter was awake with one parent or the other, and they both enjoyed pretty much full-time time sharing. They slept when she was with the other parent and worked.
Well, it's always good when there's as happy an ending as there can be to these matters. They can get contentious, all the emotional baggage that's saved up during.
Well, and the problem is that when you're in the middle of the stress of a divorce, it's hard to think clearly. It is. And so we actually work on de-stressing people during this process, not just take deep breaths. It's more than that. Remember that visit. You know how when people are planning a vacation, they say that's almost as good as, or even as good as going on vacation. It's the same idea. Remember your wedding. How did you feel when you were getting married? Were you happy? You weren't sad, were you? You were, remember that feeling and try and recapture that now. That will help you calm down and think about how you want to resolve this. Really, and believe it or not, it works.
Oh, yeah, I know. And go back to happier times, bring those feelings forward. Well, sounds like this is the way to go. We need to see it in more areas of the law so you can get rid of all these cases, because the caseload has exploded.
Yeah.
I've been involved in the legal system since I was a little kid, and I've just seen the number of cases go up, up, up. And the satisfaction with the system and with the legal profession has gone into the toilet. So this is the way to go. Hey, people want to find out more about what you're doing, Joryn, connect with you, maybe even hire you as a consultant. How do you do that?
I have two websites. One is my practice website. So that's Open Palm Law, because an open palm holds more than a closed fist. And the other, as you might guess, is jorynjenkins.com. And that's where all my marketing materials are. So I have a slew of books. You can see some of them behind me. Many I've written about the collaborative process, and I have many of my stories in those books, which are kind of fun to read about. Not to live, but to read.
Yeah, definitely a vicarious experience there.
Yeah.
For sure. Hey, if you got a question for Joryn, you can always shoot us an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. Make sure you go to the show notes of this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. You can just click through to Joryn's sites. And while you're there, sign up for your free newsletter. Joryn, been a pleasure. Thanks so much for stopping by.
You as well, Kerry. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.